The CEO waited at the wrong restaurant until a kind teacher sat down and changed his life. The soft clinking of cutlery and gentle hum of conversation filled Sunday Garden, a modest yet inviting restaurant nestled in a quiet residential corner. Its walls were adorned with potted herbs, hand-painted tiles, and framed quotes about kindness. It wasn't the kind of place Nathan Cole usually found himself in, but tonight was different. Nathan, 35, a composed and sharply dressed CEO, sat at a corner table near the window, a chamomile tea slowly cooling in front of him. He glanced at his phone again. 6:57 p.m. His blind date, set up by a well-meaning colleague, was supposed to arrive at 6:30. No message, no call. He straightened his cuffs, maintaining his composure, though the waitstaff had already given him sympathetic glances. He hated looking out of place, especially here in a room filled with couples and friends sharing laughter over simple meals. He checked the message again. Garden and Vine, 6:30. She'll be in yellow. Her name's Claire. He looked around. No yellow. Just then the front door creaked open. A woman stepped inside, brushing wisps of golden hair from her face. She wore a simple beige dress, slightly wrinkled from a long day, her curls pulled back in a loose tie. She looked around, hesitated, then approached the host's stand. After a brief exchange and a nod toward the packed room, she made her way toward Nathan's table. "Excuse me," she said gently, clutching her tote bag. "Excuse me, can I sit here?" Nathan blinked. Caught off guard, Nathan assumed this was Claire. Perhaps she changed outfits. Maybe she was just as nervous as he was. He nodded politely. "Of course, please have a seat." She smiled, sliding into the chair across from him. "You're really kind. I'm lucky to have run into someone like you tonight." Nathan gave a small smile in return. "It's no trouble." She exhaled softly, visibly tired. "I just came from school. I teach first grade. Mondays are like marathons, but with crayons." Nathan chuckled, a rare, unguarded sound. "That sounds intense." "You get used to it," she grinned. "I'm Charlotte, by the way." He hesitated. "Charlotte?" She tilted her head. "Yes." He looked at her, then at his phone again. Something clicked. No yellow, no Claire. He began, then showed her the screen. "I was supposed to meet someone named Claire. I think I may have assumed." Charlotte's eyes widened. Oh no, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to." She quickly began gathering her bag. "I thought you were just a kind stranger. I didn't mean to ruin your date." Nathan, now realizing what had happened, tapped on the message thread again. His eyes widened slightly. He looked up and stopped her. "Wait, please don't go." She paused. "I just checked," he said, managing a sheepish smile. "I came to the wrong place. It was supposed to be Garden and Vine. This is Sunday Garden." Her mouth dropped slightly. "You've been waiting here all this time?" "I have," he said with a quiet laugh. "And I think my date has left. Probably thought I stood her up." Charlotte hesitated, her hand still holding her bag strap. "You can stay," Nathan said, motioning to the seat. "Honestly, I think my evening just got a lot more interesting." She eased back down, brushing a curl behind her ear. "Only if you're sure." "I am." They sat in that little corner of the restaurant, steam curling up from their teacups. The awkwardness dissolved into a light, genuine conversation about favorite books, their childhood dreams, and the best type of bread. By the time the plates were cleared, neither of them had noticed the clock ticking. They were too caught up in the unexpected warmth of the moment, two strangers who met by mistake but stayed by choice. Charlotte closed the door behind her quietly, slipping off her flats by the mat. The scent of chamomile and old fabric filled their modest two-bedroom apartment. In the living room, her mother Grace sat humming an old lullaby while gently brushing Ellie's blonde hair. The little girl, dressed in her favorite pink dress with a bow, was coloring quietly with worn-out crayons. "How was school, Mommy?" Ellie asked without looking up. "Tiring," Charlotte replied, setting her bag down. "But I met someone unexpected." Grace looked over, intrigued. "A parent?" Charlotte shook her head, heading into the kitchen to make tea. "No, a man. I accidentally sat with him at a restaurant. Thought he was just another diner." Grace's brow lifted. "Just another diner?" "I mean, I thought I was interrupting him, but he invited me to stay. We talked. He was kind, quiet, like he's used to being alone." Charlotte didn't mention how she had laughed more in that hour than she had in weeks, or how when he looked at her while she spoke, it felt like he truly saw her, not as a teacher, not as a tired woman trying to hold her world together, but as Charlotte. Meanwhile, across town in a high-rise apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows and art that cost more than Charlotte's monthly rent, Nathan stood by his kitchen counter, sipping whiskey he barely tasted. His phone was silent. The failed blind date was no longer on his mind. Instead, he was replaying a different conversation, one about first-grade marathons and crayon-stained lesson plans, about a girl who laughed at herself when she spilled water, then shrugged it off with, "Well, at least I didn't spill coffee." There was something about her, not her appearance, though he'd noticed the soft gold of her hair, the flecks of blue in her eyes, but it was more than that. It was the way she asked questions without judgment, the way she listened, the way she made a stranger feel human again. He sat down and opened his laptop, ignoring a string of emails from investors and board members. His gaze wandered to a photo tucked into a corner of his screen, a faded image of himself as a boy, sitting alone at the edge of the playground. He had spent much of his life proving he was more than that boy, earning power, respect, control. But tonight, for the first time in years, he had let himself just be. Charlotte stood at the kitchen sink watching the lights flicker in the apartment across the alley. Her tea had gone cold in her hand. She thought of Nathan's voice, low, steady, a bit surprised each time she made him laugh. She thought of how he never once looked at his phone during dinner, never asked about her income or marital status, just listened. She whispered, half to herself, "I didn't even ask what he does for a living." Nathan, too, hadn't said a word about being a CEO. He had wanted to. But when she said, "You have a calm energy like someone who's learned not to rush," he had paused. She hadn't seen him as a job title, and he didn't want to ruin that. So instead of telling her about board meetings and profit margins, he had told her about a dog he once rescued and named Buttons, about how he never quite learned how to cook rice. He smiled now, realizing she probably thought he was just some quiet guy with an odd sense of humor. And somehow he liked that. Two people, two very different lives, one teaching children how to hold a pencil and dream past poverty, the other juggling million-dollar decisions and forgetting how to smile. But somehow, that evening had stitched a thread between them, a thread neither of them quite knew what to do with. Yet, Nathan told himself he just needed fresh air. That was the only reason he returned to Sunday Garden 3 days later. It had nothing to do with the soft-spoken woman with the kind eyes and golden curls who had sat across from him, sipping tea and smiling like she had not smiled in weeks. Nothing at all. He took the same seat, tucked into the corner near the window, ordered the same black coffee, and then, as if the universe had quietly nodded, she walked in. Charlotte didn't see him at first. She was balancing a paper bag in one hand, checking her phone with the other. Her hair was up in its usual loose knot, a few strands curling around her cheek. When her eyes met his, surprise lit up her face. "Oh, hi," she said, smiling as she approached. "What are the odds?" Nathan stood slightly, returning her smile. "Looks like we both have good taste in cafes." Charlotte held up the bag. "I just came to grab some pastries for my mom. She's obsessed with their lemon scones. Would you like to sit for a few minutes?" he asked, almost unsure why he felt nervous. She hesitated, then nodded. "Why not? I could use a break." They sat again, same table, different moment. This time, the awkwardness of strangers was replaced by something warmer, familiar. Nathan didn't mention work. When she asked what he did, he simply said, "Finance." A bit of everything. She didn't press. Instead, she talked about her students, about a little boy who refused to use capital letters because they're too shouty, about a parent who cried in a meeting because their child had read a sentence aloud for the first time. Nathan listened, quietly fascinated. This woman carried whole worlds. As the conversation drifted, he surprised himself by sharing small pieces of his past. The orphanage, the toy soldier he kept under his pillow, how he used to imagine being important enough for someone to remember his birthday. Charlotte didn't interrupt, just nodded gently when he paused. Her presence didn't push, didn't pry. It just welcomed. In the weeks that followed, the chance meetings continued, once at the corner bookstore, once in the park where Ellie played, and twice again at Sunday Garden. Eventually, the encounters lost their accidental feel. They began messaging occasionally, just small notes, a photo of a squirrel stealing someone's sandwich, a quote from one of her students' thank you card, a joke about tax season that he wasn't sure she understood, but she laughed anyway. Every time they met, it felt more like stepping into a quiet sanctuary neither of them realized they needed. One afternoon, as they lingered over tea, Charlotte sighed, "I hate asking parents for money. Half my class qualifies for free lunch, but they still need supplies. I spent my grocery budget on crayons last week." Nathan looked at her, then something tightening in his chest. "I'm sorry. That sounds exhausting." She shrugged. "It is. But also, it's what I signed up for. These kids deserve the best version of me, even if that means skipping a few lattes." She laughed at herself and took another sip of tea. Nathan said nothing, but he didn't forget. The next morning, as Charlotte unlocked her classroom, she found a large cardboard box on her desk. Curious, she opened it and gasped. Inside were dozens of neatly packed boxes of crayons, markers, watercolors, and sketch pads. A note sat on top, handwritten on a small, unlined card, from someone who once dreamed of holding a crayon to draw his own future. She read it twice, then a third time. Tears welled in her eyes. There was no name, no signature, just words that landed straight in her heart. She looked out the classroom window, watching the early sunlight hit the playground. And though she didn't know who had sent the supplies, she did know who she wanted it to be. It was a quiet Saturday afternoon when Nathan found himself strolling through a small park tucked behind a modest neighborhood. He held a coffee in one hand, the other buried in his coat pocket as he walked without direction, letting his thoughts wander. He had told himself he was just taking a break, enjoying the autumn air, but somewhere deep down he was hoping to run into her. As he rounded a bend near the playground, he saw her. Charlotte sat on a weathered bench beneath a tree, the sunlight casting soft rays over her blonde curls, now loosely tied back. She was watching a little girl in a pink dress with a matching bow in her hair, who was hopping from one patch of grass to another, arms stretched like airplane wings. The girl tripped on a tree root, let out a tiny yelp, then giggled and scrambled back to her feet. She ran straight toward Charlotte and wrapped her arms around her. "Mommy!" the little girl chirped. Nathan froze. He stood there, unmoving, heart thudding dully in his chest. His first instinct was to step back, to leave before she noticed him. She had a family? A daughter? What had he been thinking? Was he just some distraction to a woman who already had a life? The disappointment sat heavy in his chest, uninvited and sudden. He didn't want to assume, but the word mommy rang in his ears louder than he expected. Charlotte looked up just then, her eyes scanning the park until they met his. Her face lit up with a smile that was so effortlessly genuine it cut through his hesitation. "Nathan, you're just in time," she called, waving him over. He approached slowly, carefully hiding the flicker of confusion behind a polite smile. She didn't look flustered to see him. If anything, she seemed pleased. Nathan stopped a few steps from the bench, nodding toward the child. "I didn't know you had a daughter." Charlotte looked down at the little girl, who was now examining a fallen leaf in her lap, then brushed a strand of hair from the girl's forehead. "This is Ellie," she said softly. "She's my daughter. By heart, not by birth. I adopted her 3 years ago from a local shelter." Nathan blinked. Relief swept over him so fast it nearly made him dizzy. Not because Ellie wasn't hers by blood, but because he had jumped to conclusions, and they had all been wrong. "Oh," he said, his voice quieter than usual. "That's amazing." Charlotte smiled, her eyes soft. "She's everything." Ellie looked up then, squinting curiously at the stranger standing beside her mother. "Is he your friend, Mommy?" she asked. Charlotte chuckled. "He might be." Nathan crouched to her level, offering a friendly wave. "Hi, Ellie. I'm Nathan." Ellie tilted her head. "You sound like Mr. Coffee Man." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Coffee Man?" Charlotte covered a laugh. "Long story?" They sat together on the bench. Ellie climbed between them, content to doodle on her notepad while Charlotte and Nathan talked. He listened as she shared how Ellie had changed her life, how teaching and motherhood had become one and the same for her. Nathan watched Charlotte closely, her gentle tone, the way she smoothed Ellie's dress without thinking, the quiet pride in her voice. This wasn't just kindness. This was devotion. Love in its purest form. He had met plenty of people with carefully crafted public images, ones who performed generosity like a show. But Charlotte was different. She didn't need a stage, she simply gave quietly and consistently, like it was the most natural thing in the world. As the afternoon drifted into early evening, Ellie turned to Nathan with sudden curiosity. "You know what?" she said, eyes wide with excitement. "You look like the dad in my comic book. He has brown hair and a serious face, but he's really nice inside." Nathan blinked, a little caught off guard. "Is that so?" he asked. Ellie nodded seriously. "He helps people even when they don't ask. And he makes spaghetti really well." Nathan laughed softly. "I can't promise the spaghetti part, but I'll take the compliment." Then Ellie looked at him with a hopeful expression. "Can you have dinner with us? On Saturday? Mommy always lets me pick one guest." Charlotte looked momentarily surprised, glancing at Nathan with the beginnings of a blush. He turned to Ellie. "Dinner sounds great." He turned to Charlotte next, who gave him a hesitant but warm nod. And just like that, something shifted. For the first time in a very long time, Nathan didn't feel like a visitor to someone else's life. He felt invited, expected, maybe even needed. Saturday morning sunlight spilled through the kitchen window as Charlotte stood over the kettle, pouring hot water into her coffee mug. She had a stack of papers beside her, lesson plans for the upcoming week, worksheets for her speech therapy class, and a list of parents she needed to call. Her mind was full, but her heart still lingered on the memory of last weekend's park visit, where Ellie had called out to Nathan with such innocent joy, and he'd smiled like he truly belonged there. As she took a sip of her coffee, her phone buzzed. Absent-mindedly, she tapped the screen. A news headline caught her eye. Nathan Cole, the visionary CEO behind America's leading investment empire. Beneath the title was a crisp photo of a man in a charcoal suit, shaking hands with some high-profile figure at a gala. The face in the photo sent a jolt through her chest. It was him, Nathan. Her hand froze mid-air, coffee trembling in the cup. Slowly she set it down, heart racing. She scrolled. Another photo showed him delivering a keynote speech, then another with him in front of a skyscraper bearing the name Cole Ventures. Words like Forbes, 40 under 40, and economic powerhouse danced across the screen. The Nathan she had shared tea with. The man who listened quietly as she spoke about crayons and underfunded schools. The man Ellie called Mr. Coffee Man. She slumped into a chair. Her breath caught in her throat. He knew who I was, but I had no idea who he really was. She closed her eyes. Every memory, every laugh they had shared now felt distorted, like pieces from a story she hadn't truly read. It was as if she had been a background character in someone else's perfectly written script. Charlotte stood and glanced around her kitchen. The chipped counter, the faded tiles, the tiny living room beyond, where her mother Grace was softly retelling a fairy tale to Ellie, though she'd already told it twice today. Her mother's memory was slipping, like sand through her fingers. Ellie sat cross-legged on the rug, dressed in her favorite pink dress with the little bow, coloring in a book with stubby crayons. Charlotte's eyes welled up. "He lives in penthouses," she whispered. "We eat soup from scratch." She bit her lip. Her heart ached, but her mind built walls. She remembered her best friend Mia, who had once fallen for a wealthy man. His family never approved. They called her a phase and unworthy. Mia left broken. Charlotte remembered her mother's words, spoken from years of teaching and hardship. "People like us. We look for someone who understands us, not someone who pities us. If they have to lift you up to reach you, one day they'll grow tired and let go." Charlotte clutched the mug tighter. Was that why he never told me? Did he think I wouldn't handle it? Or worse, did he enjoy watching me not know? She recalled the box of crayons delivered anonymously. Her heart had melted then, but now it burned. If he bought those just because he saw me as a charity case, then that wasn't love. That was sympathy. She didn't want to be someone's good deed. She wanted to be someone's choice. Heart pounding, she opened her phone. Her fingers hesitated, then flew across the keyboard. "I thought you were like me, honest, simple. But it turns out everything was just a soft-spoken performance from a man used to controlling the world. Thank you for your kindness, but I don't need a favor. I need something real." She hit send. Nathan, somewhere across the city, received the message in the middle of a meeting. He stared at the screen, stunned. He called her. It rang. Once. Twice. Then voicemail. That night, Charlotte sat on Ellie's bed, gently stroking her daughter's hair. "Mommy?" Ellie asked softly. Where's Mr. Coffee Man? He didn't come tell stories today. Charlotte swallowed hard. She pulled Ellie closer, hugging her tightly. Tears streamed down her cheeks, silent and warm. She had never imagined she would have to choose between protecting her heart and letting it open. In the quiet of that dimly lit room, her heart felt like a battlefield, torn between love and pride, between what she felt and what she feared. She kissed Ellie's forehead and whispered, "Good night, my love." But the ache in her chest was louder than any lullaby. The air inside the teacher's lounge felt heavier than usual. Overhead lights flickered slightly, mirroring the uncertainty that loomed over the staff of Brighton Elementary. Charlotte sat quietly at the round table, fingers gripping her coffee mug as the principal stood before them with a grim expression. "The district has confirmed the budget cuts," she said softly. "The language support program for special needs students will be shut down unless we find a private sponsor by the end of this month." A murmur of concern rippled through the room. Charlotte felt the weight of every child's face flash in her mind. Miguel, who finally started forming full sentences. Avery, who used color-coded cards to express emotions. She couldn't let this happen. Over the next few days, she and a small group of teachers sprang into action. They designed flyers, launched a crowdfunding page, hosted a bake sale outside the school gates, and even live-streamed a mini talent show featuring their students. Every evening, Charlotte stayed up late crafting lesson plans and editing videos, hoping for a miracle. But a week passed, and the donation counter barely ticked over $320. Still, she smiled for her students the next morning, still taped up posters, still believed that somehow kindness would return in kind. Then, on Monday morning, the staff was summoned again, this time to the library. The principal walked in holding a single envelope. Her hands trembled. "We've just received a full sponsorship," she announced, voice cracking. "Funding for the language support program, secured for the next 3 years." There was stunned silence. Charlotte blinked, unsure if she had heard correctly. When someone asked who had donated, the principal lifted a letter from the envelope and read aloud, "For the teacher who believed crayons could change a future." Charlotte's breath caught. Her world stilled. Those words, that exact sentence. She had said it during a quiet evening over tea at Sunday Garden. Nathan had listened in silence. Now those same words echoed back to her, carrying a message deeper than dollars. She stepped out into the hallway, away from the cheers and questions. The walls blurred as tears filled her eyes. It wasn't the money that moved her, it was the gesture. The quiet, unseen love. The choice to give without expectation. To care from a distance. Just then, Ellie came running down the hall, her pink dress fluttering, holding something in her hand. "Mommy, look what came in my cubby." Charlotte knelt down. Ellie handed her a small postcard, bright blue with a hand-drawn coffee cup on it. She flipped it over. "Some people come back not when you want, but exactly when you need. Mr. Coffee Man." Her heart clenched. She hugged Ellie tightly, pressing her face into the little girl's shoulder. Through the tears, she smiled because in that moment she knew Nathan hadn't vanished. He hadn't left her behind. He had simply stepped back to let her shine, to show love without overshadowing it. Charlotte looked up at the cloudy sky outside the window, and in her heart, the first rays of light were beginning to break through. Saturday afternoon draped Sunday Garden in a warm amber light. The little cafe buzzed with quiet chatter, forks gently clinking against plates. In the far corner, Charlotte sat alone, hands wrapped around a ceramic mug. It was the same corner where months ago a mistaken seat had led to something she could never quite forget. She hadn't planned to come, but Ellie's question from the night before, "Will Mr. Coffee Man come back if I wish hard enough?" had echoed louder than sleep. Now here she was, her heart quiet but restless. She wasn't sure if she hoped or feared he would appear. A young server approached her table with a tray. On it, a cup of ginger tea just the way she liked it, and a folded note. She frowned. I didn't order this. The server smiled, then walked away. She opened the note. In slanted handwriting it read, "He didn't come to be a CEO. He came to be seen for who he truly is." Her breath caught, and then she felt it, a quiet presence. She looked up. There he was. Nathan stood by the entrance, no tailored suit, no polished shoes. Just a pale blue button-down, sleeves gently rolled, eyes searching until they found hers. Not a man from headlines, but the one who once listened to her talk about crayons and dreams. Charlotte rose slowly. Her hands trembled just enough to notice. Before she could say anything, Nathan spoke. "I used to think power was the only way to be seen," he said, voice low but steady. "That if I wasn't leading something, building something, controlling something, I'd disappear." His eyes locked with hers. "But then you came, and you saw me. When I was just a guy in the wrong restaurant, you looked at me like I mattered." He paused, stepped closer. "I was raised in a children's home. I used to imagine what it'd be like to sit in a cozy place like this, across from someone who didn't want anything from me except maybe a story and a smile." Charlotte's eyes filled. She whispered, "Why now, Nathan? Why come back?" He smiled. Something fragile and full in it. "Because I finally realized I wasn't supposed to rescue you. You never needed that. I came back because I need you. Not because you're kind, not because you teach or bake or care, but because with you I remember who I am when I'm not hiding." Charlotte stared at him for a long moment. Then she stepped forward. "You should have told me," she said quietly. "I know. And I was scared. I know that too." Silence lingered between them, full, not empty. Then slowly Nathan extended his hand. Charlotte looked down, then back at him. No penthouse, no fairy tale. Just this. She placed her hand in his, fingers laced, firm and real, and in that clasp every what if dissolved. No fear, no hierarchy, only a choice, simple, mutual, and true. Several months had passed, and the seasons had gently turned. In a quiet neighborhood far from the city's noise, a small house with a white picket fence now stood as home to a new kind of family. Charlotte stood on the porch, barefoot, watering a line of sunflowers. Beside her, Ellie ran barefoot through the garden, wearing her favorite pink dress with the oversized bow. She was laughing, chasing bubbles with a tin of crayons tucked under one arm. From the front window, soft music played. The scent of fresh bread wafted from the kitchen where Grace, Charlotte's mother, sat at the table with two children from next door. Her voice carried through the open window as she told them a fairy tale, though she paused now and then, searching for forgotten names. Ellie would lean in and whisper the missing words, giggling. Grace would nod like she remembered all along. Nathan was in the backyard, kneeling beside a small group of kids. He held a rope and a wooden board, demonstrating how to build a swing. The kids listened with wide eyes, some from Charlotte's school, others from the neighborhood. He had taken time off work, trading conference rooms and board meetings for chalkboards and carpentry. He called it his reset. Charlotte simply called it his heart. That afternoon, as the sun began to dip behind the trees, Nathan walked back toward the porch. Charlotte met him halfway on the stone path, taking his hand naturally, as if it had always belonged there. They strolled through the garden in silence, fingers intertwined, their steps unhurried. From behind them, Ellie called out, "Mr. Coffee Man, come see my rainbow." Nathan turned, smiling. "Be right there, sweetheart." Charlotte looked up at him. "You're really getting used to that name, huh?" He chuckled. "I've been called worse by board members." They laughed together, the kind of laughter that comes not from amusement but from ease, from the comfort of belonging. As they reached the edge of the garden, the light was golden, casting long shadows on the grass. Charlotte rested her head on Nathan's shoulder. He looked ahead and said softly, almost to himself, "I showed up at the wrong restaurant." She turned to him, curious. "But I found the right person for the rest of my life. Thank you for joining us on this heartfelt journey of love, resilience, and second chances." Nathan and Charlotte's story reminds us that even the most unexpected meetings can change a life forever. And sometimes showing up at the wrong place leads us exactly where we're meant to be. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Kindness and Love Tales for more stories that warm the soul and celebrate the beauty of human connection. Until next time, keep believing in love, the kind that sees, chooses, and stays.